There is a kind of silence that wraps itself around a person, not the quiet of peace, but the hush of solitude, and in that hush there's a woman, maybe you've seen her, maybe you are her. She walks with her head held just high enough to mask the ache in her heart. She smiles, but her soul is tired, not because she's weak, but because she's been strong for too long. She walks alone, not because she wants to, but because life, in all its twists and turns, has drawn a path where no hand reaches out, no voice says, "Let me walk with you." There is something profoundly reassuring in knowing that we are seen. For many, being seen feels like being valued, understood, and acknowledged. But for the woman who walks alone, this can feel like a distant hope. She moves through the world with a quiet strength that often goes unnoticed. She carries burdens silently, meets responsibilities with resilience, and endures disappointments without fanfare. There are no crowds applauding her, no one recording her faithfulness. And yet she keeps walking, not because it's easy, but because she must. And in those unseen moments, in the solitude where no one seems to notice, God does. God sees her, not with a passing glance, not with vague awareness, but with the full attention of a father who knows every heartbeat. His eyes are not distracted, he is not busy, he is not overlooking her in favor of someone louder or more visible. His gaze is fixed. When she feels invisible to the world, when her efforts go unrecognized, when her sacrifices are taken for granted, God sees. And not only does he see what she does, he sees who she is. He sees the battles she fights in secret, the prayers she whispers in the dark, the tears she wipes away before anyone can notice. Throughout Scripture, we see that God has always had his eyes on the ones the world overlooks. In the book of Genesis, there is a woman named Hagar who fled into the wilderness. Abused, rejected, and cast out, she found herself alone. It was in that loneliness that God appeared to her. He called her by name and revealed himself to her as the God who sees. She named him El Roi, the God who sees me, not just the God who sees the stars or the universe or the great kings of the earth, but the God who sees me, a servant girl in the desert, alone and afraid. And yet not invisible, that same God sees every woman who walks alone today. He sees the one raising children without a partner, doing the work of two with the strength of one. He sees the one sitting in a quiet house, where silence fills the spaces that laughter used to echo. He sees the one who's walked away from abuse or betrayal, and now finds herself rebuilding from rubble. He sees the one who has longed for companionship, but has remained single, not by choice, but by the unfolding of a story she didn't script. He sees the one who has endured heartbreak, disappointment, and the weight of unanswered prayers. God doesn't just see her circumstances, he sees her asterisk. He sees the faith that keeps her grounded, the courage that moves her forward, the love that overflows from a heart that has been both broken and healed. He sees the dreams she's held on to and the ones she's had to lay down. He sees the way she's shown up for others, even when no one showed up for her. He sees her when she serves, when she gives, when she waits, when she trusts. He sees the strength it takes to face each day with grace when there is no one there to lean on. And because he sees her, she is never truly alone. His vision is not distant. His awareness is not passive. He is present, involved, near. To be seen by God is not merely to be watched. It is to be known intimately and loved deeply. It means that nothing about her life is overlooked. Every detail matters. Every sigh, every step, every tear is noticed and remembered. Even when others forget her name or pass her by without acknowledgement, God never forgets. His eyes are always on her. This divine attention brings dignity to her solitude. It transforms what might seem like abandonment into a place of holy encounter. The woman who walks alone is not walking in vain. She is not walking unnoticed. The path she travels, even if it winds through wilderness and shadow, is not forsaken. It is observed, honored, and accompanied by a loving God who never looks away. When we think of whispers, we think of nearness. A whisper is not loud. It does not come from across the room. It comes when someone is close enough to lean in and speak softly, and that is exactly how God speaks to the woman who walks alone. Not in shouts, not in thunder, not in the noise of the crowd, but in the quiet, gentle whisper that reaches her heart when the rest of the world goes silent. There is something sacred about solitude. It may not always feel welcome, and it may not always feel comforting, but it creates a space where the voice of God can be heard more clearly than anywhere else. In the noise of life, when distractions are many and demands are loud, it's easy to miss the still small voice of God. But when everything else is stripped away, when the room is quiet, when the world seems distant, that's when his whisper becomes unmistakable. It's not just a whisper of comfort. It's a whisper of identity, of presence, of deep and abiding love. God whispers not because he is far, but because he is close, and his nearness is often felt most when human companionship is absent. There's a story in 1 Kings about the prophet Elijah, who found himself exhausted, afraid, and alone. He had fled to the wilderness, overwhelmed and discouraged, and in that place of desperation God told him to stand on the mountain because the Lord was about to pass by. First came a powerful wind that tore through the mountains, but God was not in the wind. Then came an earthquake, but God was not in the earthquake. Then came a fire, but God was not in the fire. And then came a gentle whisper, and that was where God was. Not in the spectacle, not in the drama, but in the whisper. That's where his presence dwelled. In the same way, when a woman walks through life alone, when she is no longer surrounded by the comfort of others, when she finds herself in a quiet season, God speaks. And he speaks gently. The world may have ignored her, left her, misunderstood her, or forgotten her. But God draws near, and he doesn't demand attention. He doesn't shout over the silence. Instead, he whispers into it. He whispers truths that the world could never speak. He whispers, "You are mine." He whispers, "I am with you." He whispers, "You are not forgotten." The whisper of God is powerful. It may be quiet, but it cuts through fear. It may be soft, but it silences lies. It may be gentle, but it carries the weight of eternal truth. It comes when the woman walking alone has no one else to lean on and nothing else to trust. And it meets her where she is not where she thinks she should be, not where others expect her to be, but right where she is. God does not wait for her to arrive at some perfect place. He whispers to her in the middle of her journey. It is in those whispered moments that her soul is restored. It is in the silence that his presence becomes her anchor. Others may have opinions, others may offer advice, but God's whisper goes deeper. It settles into her bones. It reminds her that even when her steps are quiet and her story is hidden, she is never outside the reach of his voice. It is a voice that does not condemn. It is a voice that does not criticize. It is a voice that simply loves, and often it is when she has no one else to listen to that she finally learns how to listen to him. Not because she was doing something wrong before, but because the solitude allowed her to finally hear. Sometimes the absence of other voices makes room for the one voice that truly matters. And in that sacred hush, when the world has gone quiet, the woman who walks alone realizes she is not alone at all. She is held, she is known, and she is being spoken to by the God who sees, who stays, and who whispers. The world has its own way of measuring worth. It looks for status, titles, relationships, wealth, recognition. It places value on being seen, being surrounded, being chosen by others. For a woman walking alone, the world's scale often feels harsh and unfair. She might be overlooked, underestimated, or even pitied, not because of what she lacks, but because she doesn't fit the mold the world celebrates. She doesn't have the picture, perfect marriage, the full dinner table, the crowd of friends. And yet, what the world fails to see is something God treasures deeply, her faith. God never measured worth the way the world does. He never needed crowds to validate a calling or applause to prove significance. Time and again, he honored those who stood alone, not because they were isolated, but because they walked with him. When others turned away, they stood firm. When others compromised, they remained faithful. And in that kind of quiet obedience, God sees immense value. A woman's worth in his eyes is not tied to her relationship status, her social circle, or her public image. It's tied to her heart. Her faith, her trust in him when there is no one else to lean on. The woman who walks alone knows the cost of choosing God over comfort. She knows the strength it takes to show up to church by herself. She knows the ache of sitting at a table set for one. She knows the challenge of making decisions without a partner's counsel. But instead of letting those things define her, she turns her face toward heaven. She decides that even if no one else sees her, even if no one else walks beside her, she will walk with God. And in that decision she declares her worth, not by shouting it to the world, but by living it out with quiet resolve. There's a kind of holiness in her solitude. It's not the absence of people that makes it sacred. It's the presence of faith, faith that God is enough, faith that he sees, faith that he provides. That kind of faith doesn't make headlines. It doesn't always get praised, but it moves heaven. It moves the heart of God. Because anyone can have faith when the world is clapping, but real faith is forged in the stillness, in the shadows, in the spaces where no one is watching but God. When Jesus walked the earth, he saw value where others saw none. He sat with the woman at the well, a woman others avoided. He honored the widow who gave her last 2 coins. He defended the woman caught in adultery. He was not swayed by status, beauty, or reputation. He looked straight at the heart. He saw faith, humility, and honesty. He gave dignity to women who had been dismissed and elevated those who were overlooked. And he does the same today. For the woman who walks alone, this truth is a lifeline. She doesn't need to prove her worth. She doesn't need to chase affirmation. She is already chosen, already known, already valued by the one who formed her in the secret place. Her worth is anchored in something deeper than changing seasons or shifting relationships. It is anchored in her Creator, and what she builds in her aloneness is something precious. She builds a faith that doesn't depend on feelings. She builds a trust that isn't shaken by circumstances. She builds a relationship with God that becomes her foundation. While others may fill their lives with noise and movement, she learns to be still. She learns to listen. She learns to stand, and in doing so, she discovers a kind of strength that cannot be manufactured, only received. The world may try to define her worth by what she lacks, but heaven defines it by what she holds: faith, endurance, and a heart that remains open to God. She doesn't walk alone because she failed. She walks alone because she followed, and where she walks, God walks too. Her steps may not echo loudly on earth, but they leave a mark in eternity. There is a comfort that comes from knowing someone is beside you. When life is hard, when burdens are heavy, when nights stretch long and uncertain, having another presence nearby can make all the difference. But for the woman who walks alone, that presence often isn't there, not in the physical sense. She faces decisions, challenges, and emotions without a hand to hold or a voice to steady her. And yet, though it may seem she walks by herself, she is never truly alone. God walks beside her, not in theory, not in some distant theological sense, but in real, personal, daily companionship. God doesn't wait for her to get it all together before he joins her on the path. He doesn't require perfection. He doesn't demand that she be strong all the time. He walks with her as she is wounded, weary, unsure. And he does so faithfully. Others may come and go. People might leave, betray, forget, or grow distant, but God remains. His steps are steady beside hers, even when hers begin to falter. Even when she doesn't feel him, even when her prayers feel unanswered, even when the road seems endless, he is there. He walks with her through seasons she never asked for, through grief, through disappointment, through loneliness. He walks with her into rooms where she feels like she doesn't belong, into hospitals, into courtrooms, into empty homes, into new beginnings and painful goodbyes, and he doesn't rush ahead or fall behind. He matches her pace. He knows her rhythm. He knows when she needs to sit and weep, when she needs to fight and rise, when she needs to just keep moving even if it's slow. Throughout Scripture, we see a God who walks with his people. He walked with Adam and Eve in the garden. He walked with the Israelites through the wilderness. He walked with the disciples on dusty roads, and he walks still. The promise of his presence is not tied to crowds or celebrations. It is often most real in the quiet, unnoticed places where human strength fades and divine strength begins. For the woman who walks alone, this truth is not just comforting, it's life-giving. She may not have someone physically there to hold her hand, but she is being held. She may not have someone to speak words of encouragement to her, but she is being spoken to. She may not have anyone checking in on her, but she is being watched over. She may not have someone to carry her burdens, but she is being sustained. When she doubts, he remains faithful. When she cries, he catches every tear. When she struggles, he supplies grace for each step. He knows the way she takes. He knows the weight she bears. He walks with her not as a silent bystander, but as an active, loving guide. He leads her beside still waters. He restores her soul. He defends her in spiritual battle. He comforts her in suffering. He cheers for her when no one else sees her victories. And because he walks with her, she can keep going. Not because it's easy, not because she's always strong, but because she is not walking in her own strength. She is walking in his. She leans on him, and he does not fail. She trusts in him, and he proves himself faithful. She calls to him, and he answers, not always with immediate solutions, but always with his presence. There's a sacredness to her journey. Others might look at her and see loneliness, but heaven sees devotion. Others might see emptiness, but God sees purpose. Others might see isolation, but God sees deep intimacy. He walks with her in the valley and on the mountain, in the dark and in the dawn. And his presence is not a temporary comfort. It is a permanent promise. Silence can feel like a void, a place where noise has fled and answers seem absent. For the woman who walks alone, silence may be her most frequent companion. Not just the quiet of a home without conversation, but the deeper silence of prayers that seem to linger without reply, of longings that go unfulfilled, of time that moves forward without the companionship she hoped would fill it. It can feel heavy, it can feel endless, and yet it is in that very silence that something divine begins to take shape. Strength is not always born in action. Often it is forged in stillness. In the silence, distractions fade. The voices that once clouded her thoughts grow distant. The expectations of others lose their grip. The pressure to perform, to impress, to keep up, all of it softens in the quiet. What remains is the raw, honest space where God begins to do his deepest work. It is not easy to sit in silence. It exposes what busyness hides. It brings to the surface fears, regrets, and wounds that have long been buried. But it also brings clarity. It reveals what truly matters. And it makes room for God to speak, to heal, to strengthen. There is something powerful about a woman who has been through silence and did not give up. A woman who has endured long seasons where the heavens felt closed, yet she remained faithful. She didn't curse God. She didn't walk away. She stayed. She kept showing up. She kept believing, and somewhere in the quiet her spirit grew strong. Her roots went deeper. Her soul became anchored, not in circumstances, but in God alone. That kind of strength cannot be faked. It cannot be learned quickly. It is cultivated over time, in solitude, in prayer, in waiting. Silence has a way of refining. It peels away what is shallow and reveals what is eternal. In silence, she learns how to pray without performance. She learns to rest without guilt. She learns to listen, really listen, to the still small voice of God. It is in the silence that she hears him call her by name. It is in the silence that she finds assurance that she is not forgotten, and it is in the silence that she discovers that God is not distant. He is present, attentive, and full of grace. The strength forged in silence is not loud or showy. It doesn't boast or beg for recognition, but it is undeniable. It's the strength that holds when everything else is falling apart. It's the strength that doesn't need to be seen to be real. It's the strength that others may not understand, but God honors. He knows how hard it was to stay when everything in her wanted to flee. He knows how much it took to trust when answers didn't come. He knows the cost of her obedience, the weight of her faithfulness. She is not strong because life has been easy. She is strong because in the silence she learned that God was enough. She found out that her hope didn't rest in outcomes, but in his presence. She discovered that peace wasn't the absence of pain, but the nearness of the one who holds all things together. Her silence became sacred ground, and in it she was not weakened, she was fortified. There's a reason Jesus often withdrew to quiet places. He knew that silence was not emptiness. It was preparation, it was communion, it was strength being poured in from heaven, and the woman who walks alone has walked that same path. She has learned that in the silence she is being formed. Not forgotten, but fashioned, not overlooked, but overseen by a loving Father. Silence for her is not punishment, it is a process, a holy process where the deepest strength is born. The woman who walks alone often carries a story that the world does not see. It is not a story filled with loud victories or public recognition, but a quiet, steady testimony of grace. From the outside, others may only see the absence, the missing partner, the empty seat, the unshared burdens. But God sees the whole narrative. He sees every chapter, every detail, every moment when she chose faith over fear, obedience over comfort, and surrender over control. Her life is not a story of being left behind. It is a story of being held together by the hands of grace. Grace has followed her into every place of pain. It has lifted her when she thought she couldn't go on. It has filled the empty places with peace. She may not even realize it at times, but grace has been her constant companion. Not the kind of grace that shouts or shines, but the kind that shows up in small, faithful ways. In the strength to get out of bed, in the courage to face another day, in the stillness that carries deep trust. Her story, written line by line, is not a tale of survival. It is a record of God's presence and provision. Others may have tried to define her story for her. Some may say she is alone because she wasn't chosen, or because she made mistakes, or because her life didn't go according to plan. But God never writes people off. He never views someone as a sum of their disappointments. He sees her story from beginning to end, and he calls it beautiful. Because in every moment she chose him, in every moment she kept walking, kept trusting, kept hoping, his grace was there, shaping something eternal in her. Her testimony isn't loud, but it's powerful. It speaks of quiet strength. It tells of prayers whispered through tears, of battles fought in secret, of victories no one else applauded but heaven. She doesn't need a platform or a spotlight. Her life itself is the message, a message that says God is faithful, that He is enough, that even in the absence of human companionship, His presence sustains. Her story is not a tragedy, it's a declaration of divine love, and it's not finished yet. The God who began a good work in her is not done writing. Her past does not disqualify her. Her current season is not the conclusion. Every day she continues to walk with him, another sentence is written, another thread of grace is woven through. Others may never know the full extent of what she's endured, but God knows. And what he writes with her life will one day shine brighter than anything the world has to offer. Her story matters, not because it fits a mold or meets expectations, but because it points to a faithful God. Her walk, though quiet, is sacred ground, and every step forward is a testimony that grace has never left her side. So to the woman who walks alone, know this: you are not forgotten, not forsaken, and not invisible. Your journey may be quiet, but heaven watches every step. The world may misunderstand your path, but God ordained it. You are not defined by who is missing from your side, but by the one who walks faithfully beside you. In your silence he speaks, in your solitude he surrounds, in your weakness he strengthens. You may feel alone, but you have never taken a single step without divine eyes upon you and divine hands beneath you. Your walk is not empty, it is holy. Keep walking. You are not just surviving. You are carrying a sacred story written by the hand of a faithful God who whispers, "You are mine.